invention in the 19th century, photography has played an increasingly important role in intelligence work. In the United States, one of its first uses as a surveillance tool was during the Civil War. Photos taken from hot air balloons were used to provide some of the earliest aerial reconnaissance.
Aerial surveillance, in other words, being able to get above the enemy, above the area you want to photograph.
Balloons, however, were limited in their effectiveness, since they were easy targets to shoot down and had a very limited range. In World War I, cameras were used in airplanes for scouting enemy terrain. And one of the most innovative examples of aerial surveillance enlisted the help of some feathered friends. The U.S. Signal Corps had a flock of 600 homing pigeons. Fitted with specially designed chest cameras, the bird cams were released and took off for their destination, clicking all the way.
The pigeon so that when the pigeon went to home, to go to its home, it would fly over the area you wanted to photograph, which might be a battlefield or a route, let's say, for tomorrow's march, whatever. In doing so, as it flew over, the camera would steadily snap off pictures. So quite
the Cold War also introduced the U-2 spy plane, which was instrumental in conducting high-altitude photographic reconnaissance. The covert aircraft was, at the time, out of range of the Soviet planes and missiles.
These were planes that were able to fly at very high speeds, at very high altitudes, beyond the reach initially of Soviet missiles. And these planes were able to gather more in a single flight than we had been able to gather for years.
During the space age, satellites opened up new surveillance opportunities. A camera on a satellite could carry out surveillance of any part of enemy territory that lay beneath its orbit. Essentially large telescopes, these cameras magnify the area they're focused on and can set their focal length accordingly.
That great technological breakthrough of our times is the development of the synchronous orbiting satellite. And so these are satellites that remain in place and give continuous coverage of selected parts of the globe. And that breakthrough was enormous, and that enabled us to gather intelligence, to surveil, if you will, Soviet military capabilities in ways we had never been able to do before.
Thanks to satellites, airfields, missile locations, and even the movement of troops were suddenly visible.
National intelligence has given the go-ahead for the nation's spy satellites to be used regularly by U.S. civilian agencies and law enforcement.
This is a development all Americans should have great pride in, because it expands and uses national technical systems, which we've built for tens of billions of dollars over many decades.
Spy satellites have primarily been used overseas to monitor things like war zones and terror training camps. They've also been used domestically, but sparingly, during events including Super Bowl games, presidential inaugurals, and hurricanes. Homeland Security officials say the satellites will now be used to protect borders and critical infrastructure. Next in line, law enforcement agencies, which are expected to start using them next year. While they can provide crucial high-resolution images, there are limits to what these satellites can do. They can't see faces, and they can't listen. At least, that's what the government claims. But privacy groups worry that because there's so much we don't know about their capabilities, they could be misused, and we wouldn't even know it.
The question always comes down to, what are the standards? Are there checks and balances? And is this a power that we would trust the executive branch to use without any outside scrutiny or oversight?